37% of American adults could not cover a $400 emergency in cash right now. 12% couldn't cover it at all. That is according to the Federal Reserve. And here is the part that stings. Some of those 37% are the people you compare yourself to. The coworkers with the fresh leases, the neighbors hosting every weekend. You look at them and you assume you are losing a game they have already won. But if the data is right, and 37% of adults are sitting on zero cash buffer, then a shocking number of the people performing success are actually standing on ice that is one bad tire away from cracking. So how would you ever know? How do you tell the difference between someone who is genuinely secure and someone who is just good at renting an expensive lifestyle? I know what you're thinking. Another video telling you to cut out your morning coffee and work 50-hour weeks until you drop. Not happening. Because here is the actual thesis of everything we are going to look at today. Visible spending and invisible security compete for the exact same dollars. Every time someone buys a status symbol, they are trading away the one thing that actually makes life quiet. And I am not judging anyone who does it. We were all trained by the exact same culture to signal our worth with things people can see. But when you look past the performance, a totally different economy starts to show up. An economy built on boring, invisible levers that require zero hustle and zero lifestyle sacrifice. There's one number that exposes all of this, and the news always reports the wrong half of it. We'll get there. But first, we have to talk about who actually wins this game. If you are like me, you grew up assuming that real wealth was a closed club. You thought it belonged to trust fund kids, corporate executives, or people who got lucky on some tech IPO in 1990-something. You look at your paycheck and you think, well, the game is already over. Except Ramsey Solutions ran a massive study on over 10,000 actual US millionaires, and the results completely break that narrative. 79% of those millionaires received zero inheritance, not a dime. They didn't start on third base. And about 1/3 of them never earned a six-figure salary in any single year of their entire working lives. Let that sit for a second. These weren't Wall Street traders. Their common professions were engineers, accountants, and public school teachers, ordinary earners. People making normal middle-class money who figured out a totally different mechanism. And here's the part nobody expects. Most of them will tell you they weren't especially disciplined, which brings us right back to that Federal Reserve finding. Because while those millionaires were quietly stacking boring assets, the broader picture for the rest of the country has been stalling out. Back in 21, 68% of adults could cover a small cash emergency. By 22, that dropped to 63%, and it has stayed flat right there through 25. 55% of people report having 3 months of savings, down from 59. Costs went up, the cushions didn't. So if you've been feeling that low-grade panic every time your car makes a weird noise, you aren't being dramatic. You are responding to real conditions. And I know the objection. I used to say it myself. Why tie up cash when credit cards exist? Why bother with a buffer? But look at what the Fed data says people actually do when they don't have cash and a bill hits. They carry a balance on a high-interest card. They borrow from family, or they sell their belongings. 12% say they couldn't pay it at all. A credit card isn't an emergency fund. It is a fuse attached to a bomb. Two people with the exact same $10,000 in savings. One earns about $39 a year. The other earns $400. Same money, same risk, same access. Let's unpack that right now. Because that $10,000 gap is where the first invisible lever lives. If you leave 10 grand sitting in a traditional big bank savings account paying the national average of around 0.38%, you get roughly $39 a year. That is pocket change. That is insulting. But if you move that exact same cash into a top high-yield account paying 4 to 5%, your annual return jumps to $400 or $500 on day one, with zero extra risk and zero extra effort. That is not investment genius. That is just moving your money out of a lazy account. Translate that into real life. $400 a year is a monthly utility bill being paid entirely by your own cash. It is a quiet little subsidy running in the background every single month, forever. That's the small lever. Now the big one, and this is that number I promised you. Every time you open the financial news, some headline tells you that 41K balances are hitting record highs. You read that and you think, everyone is crushing it except me. I must be doing something fundamentally wrong. But averages are a statistical magic trick. Vanguard's year-end data across nearly 5 million retirement participants shows an average 41K balance of $167,000. That sounds incredible, until you look at the median. The median balance, the exact middle worker in America, is $44,115. Let me translate that for you. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate, $44,000 generates about $147 a month. That is less than the monthly payment on an average new car. How can the average be $167,000 while the middle worker has $44,000? Because a very small group of quiet, high-balance savers drags that average straight up into the stratosphere, while the typical worker sits right near fragility. If you felt behind, you were comparing yourself to a number that describes almost nobody. Let's break that median down by age, because this is where the picture gets really clear. Vanguard's data shows that for workers between 35 and 44 years old, the median retirement balance is $46,900. If you step up to age 45 to 54, it moves to $78,700. Now, I want you to feel a wave of relief right here. If your balance is sitting in that zone, you are not broken, you are completely normal. But here is the terrifying flip side of that coin. Normal in America is not safe. The collective standard of our peer group is a baseline of near zero protection. And notice something else. For the typical household, the single biggest piece of net worth isn't even inside a retirement account. Hold that thought. Because if almost nobody around us is saving enough through sheer willpower, how did anyone ever build a real balance? I used to beat myself up over this. I'd tell myself I just didn't have the discipline. I'd try to manually move money every payday, forget for 3 months, spend the cash, and feel like a failure. But human beings do not run on discipline. We run on defaults. Look at what happened when retirement plans started using automatic enrollment. Vanguard's data shows that by 25, 61% of plans had automatic enrollment, up from just 10% back in 2006. And when plans make saving the default, employee participation jumps from 67% all the way up to 86 to 94%. Think about what that proves. Millions of people didn't suddenly become disciplined overnight. The system was redesigned so that doing the right thing required zero decisions. If you want to fix your finances, stop trying to be a stronger person. Change your defaults. Set up an automatic transfer for the day after payday. Make the money leave your checking account before your brain even knows it's there. Build a system that runs on your worst week, not your best one. Now, I can already hear the critique coming from the back of the room. Somebody is typing out a comment right now saying, "Come on, Ben, this is just glorified poverty. Index funds and boring savings accounts are for people with no ambition." Real money comes from aggressive bets, high-income career leaps, crypto, options trading, and taking massive risks. And you know what? Part of that critique is totally fair. Being called disciplined is not the same thing as being free. If your income is too low, no amount of cutting lattes is going to save you. You can't budget your way out of a broken earnings problem. So let's test the critique honestly. Let's look at what actually happens when people try to beat the boring approach over a real timeline. 2 decades of data on the people who thought index funds were too slow. Let's look at the SPIVA scorecards from S&P Dow Jones indices. Over 10 to 20-year horizons, the vast majority of professional active fund managers fail to beat their benchmark indexes. In most categories, over 90% of active funds lag the index over 20 years. 100% of large-cap growth funds underperformed on a risk-adjusted basis over that time frame. These are professionals with Bloomberg terminals, insider access, and analysts working 80-hour weeks. And a simple, boring index fund sitting in a retirement account quietly beats almost all of them. Imagine you're at a party. Everyone around you is shouting about their latest crypto play or options trade. They look like geniuses. They are loud. They are exciting. And in the corner, there is one quiet person who owns the entire broad market through a low-cost index fund and hasn't logged into their account in 6 months. Who do you think owns more net worth 20 years later? Some people do beat the market, sure, but you cannot identify them in advance. That is the whole trap. The exciting path is a lottery. The boring path is a statistical certainty. So let's take a step back and look at the architecture we've built. Picture an iceberg. Everything above the waterline, the leased car, the designer jacket, the vacation photos on Instagram, that is visible consumption. It costs money to maintain every single day. Everything beneath the waterline, your cash buffer earning 4%, your automated index fund positions, your credit score, your quiet habits, that is the invisible mass. And every single dollar you earn is a vote for which half of the iceberg grows. If you feed the tip, you get fragility disguised as status. If you feed the mass, you get security disguised as nothing at all. Remember those Ramsey millionaires, engineers, teachers, accountants. They didn't look like much from the street. They were feeding the mass. For the typical American household, there is one massive block down there beneath the waterline that dwarfs everything else combined. Let's look at the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. This is the data point that changes how you view housing forever. According to the Fed, the median net worth of a homeowner in America is $396,200. Do you know what the median net worth of a renter is? $10,400. Let that number land. That is roughly a 38-to-1 wealth gap, 38 times more net worth on the other side of that single property line. And before you start yelling at me about mortgage rates and housing prices, I know, it is brutal out there. But look at the mechanical reason why that gap exists. A mortgage is a forced, boring savings plan disguised as a monthly bill. Every time you make that payment, a little sliver of principal gets chipped away, moving from your checking account into your net worth. It is clumsy, it is illiquid, and over 20 years, it acts like a giant vacuum cleaner sucking cash out of your current lifestyle and dumping it straight into invisible security. And I can hear exactly what you're thinking. Ben, housing is completely out of reach for millions of people right now. If I can't buy a home in today's market, does that mean I'm locked out of this entire system? Absolutely not. Let's be completely honest about the macro reality. Costs have outpaced ordinary wages for years. That is a structural failure, not a personal one. If you are renting right now, you are not losing at life, but it means your invisible mass has to be built through the other levers we talked about. Your cash buffer, your high-yield placement, your automated index funds. You don't have to win the housing game today to start building the invisible half. And let's answer another question that's probably nagging you. When does saving cross the line from wisdom into misery? If saving your money costs you your health, your relationships, or your ability to experience the present moment, you've missed the entire point. The target is freedom, not martyrdom. So let's strip away all the theory and put the whole operating system on one page. 4 levers, done in order, each one a one-time setup that replaces years of willpower. Lever 1, build a 3-month cash buffer. Put it in a high-yield account earning 4 to 5% instead of 0.3%, turning dead cash into an automatic $50 monthly bill payer, addressing that Fed fragility stat. Lever 2, automate your contributions. Set up a recurring transfer on payday so your savings happen before you can touch the money, matching the Vanguard auto-enrollment proof that defaults beat discipline. Lever 3, own the whole market through low-cost index funds instead of trying to trade your way to riches, leaning on 20 years of SPIVA data showing active managers lose. Lever 4, make your housing as boring and permanent as your cash flow allows, anchoring onto that 38-to-1 homeowner wealth gap. And that brings us right back to our opening question. If wealth is invisible, how do you actually detect it? You don't look at the car. You ask what happens to someone if their income stops for 90 days. And you can now answer that question for yourself. Think back to that ordinary driveway from the very beginning of this video. The plain older sedan parked outside a normal house. You used to look at that car and wonder what was missing. Now you look at it and you realize you might be looking at a fortress. Real wealth is not about what you display when you finally arrive. Real wealth is waking up on a Tuesday morning and realizing that money is no longer making your decisions for you. It is deliberately, perfectly invisible, because that is what makes it durable. Drop a comment below and tell me about the exact moment you stopped performing financial success for an audience that doesn't care. Let's talk about it. Hit subscribe.